Let me restart this here. Okay. Okay, so this session is called Jumping Ship. It's about, really it's about identifying where you are right now, how you're feeling about your current position and your current job, and whether or not it's time to move on to another job, another company, another framework, language, what have you. And then just really understanding the process of when we say we're going to quit a job and go get another one, or get another job and then quit, what does that actually look like, and what's the best way to handle that in general? So I don't know a whole lot. I haven't changed jobs a ton in my career, but I've been involved in the hiring. I've been involved in several interviews on both sides of the table. I've also done a lot of support of friends who are looking for positions and helped them through that process as well. So I don't know a whole lot, but I do know how to survey people. So what I have done in this talk is I want to say thank you to all these people who I've surveyed. And these are people who have given me answers on different questions about leaving your job, finding a new job. And you can see that we've got a pretty wide range of people in different types of companies, from big companies like Dropbox to smaller companies. So I think we've got a nice range of different style of people. So you're going to see several of these people show up in quotes. And so I definitely want to say thank you. And I'm pretty sure I've got everybody's current job up to date on here, but I apologize if I don't. Oftentimes we think of, start thinking about changing our jobs. This might be our workflow that we think of. Okay, I'm going to find a new job, then I'm going to quit, and now I'm going to start my new job. And that's kind of what we think is the way we think it's going to happen. Where really what it should look like is this, which is a much more detailed workflow. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to walk through these steps here. And you can see down at the very bottom is that quit. And you may never get there in your current position. You may realize after evaluating where you are, what you currently have, that this really is the place you want to stay. So I don't want you coming out of this thinking that you've got to change your jobs, because you may want to stay where you are. So our first step is knowing whether or not it's time to leave our current position. If the departure is on your own terms, meaning you're not getting fired, but you're deciding to leave, it should not be a knee-jerk reaction. And what you're going to need is a team of people to be a sounding board. You'll need a team of people to help you really validate what you're feeling and what your options are. And so these are some examples of some people that you can have on your team as you're working through. And this is something that you should just kind of always have available to you to just bounce ideas off of. Family, mentors, former colleagues are usually really great because they've worked with you before and they know how you work, and whether or not, if you're looking at a particular position, whether or not that's a good fit or not. Jennifer, I think, talked about that this morning, about sending a job description to her friends, like, yeah, this is you perfectly. So having that validation is really important. But also the last one, I want to caution, be very careful on that one. Current coworkers, if you're really starting to think about maybe I need to move on, current coworkers can be good people to have on your team, as long as you know for sure they're trustworthy and that they'll keep it confidential. Because what you don't want is the word getting out that you're looking somewhere else, because that can end up backfiring. Basically, anyone you trust to give you honest feedback, even if that feedback may not be what you want to hear. And that's key. So keep that in mind, that you do want people who will challenge you on what you're thinking. Brandon Edling, who's a good friend of mine who works at Dropbox, says find 2 or 3 people that give you good counsel, not just what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. You may have unrealistic expectations. I have heard lots of maybe not most of the times. I've heard several people who've come to me and say, yeah, I'm way underpaid for this, and I really feel like I deserve X. And while they are underpaid, the X is way out there, and it's not realistic. And so having to try and reel that in a little bit can be difficult to do on either side, but being able to have people there who can actually talk to you and give you honest feedback is really, really important. Oftentimes, we look over and see, wait, the grass is greener over there, and I really feel like that's going to be a better place over there. And it looks like our lawn is dying, and it's so much great on the other side, but you have to ask yourself, is this really the right time to start considering a new job? Am I going to be in the same boat at that other place? Is that green grass over there really just appearance only, and when I get over there, I see that there's, dog poop all over there, because there very well could be. So keep in mind that appearance isn't everything. So you need to ask yourself why you feel like you want to leave. And here are some examples of some things that you might be considering. That you're not feeling challenged enough. I was in that boat one time. That you're seeing writing on the wall. You're seeing that the company might be starting to tank, and you're starting to hear rumblings. And so at that point, you might need to start thinking about it. You're not feeling valued by management. The compensation is not balanced with your skill set level or with your responsibilities. Or you're ready to change. Maybe you're ready to get out of a certain technology or a certain industry. You want to get into something else. Or there's just personnel issues, and that's gonna come up. And sometimes the personnel issues are big enough that it's hurting your enjoyment of your job. So when you are considering leaving, you need to have a plan, and you should not just knee-jerk. There's another quote from Brandon. If there are more than 3 months where you get up every day, look in the mirror, and say to yourself, what the hell am I doing? You've got to leave. He says 3 months because every gig has a season and things change. If you can say it for 3 months, chances are you really have felt that long. You've really felt that longer than that, and life is too short. Jennifer mentioned this earlier today, that if you are not enjoying your work, it's time to leave. I would say give that some time, and make sure it's not just maybe a certain, you're on a certain project that's going to wrap up and you just hate this project so much, but you may enjoy the next one. But if it is something where it's going to go ongoing, that's definitely a time you should really consider leaving. There's a story about a rabbi who was on a journey home from a nearby village. The sun was setting. He was intently studying scripture as he went. Because it was getting dark, he was so deep in meditation that he mistakenly took the wrong path and was no longer heading towards his home. He didn't realize this until he heard a voice shouting down at him from above. He looked up from his scripture to see a fortress in front of him and realized what had happened. The voice was from a sentry posted at the wall of the fortress. Again, he heard the voice say, "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" The rabbi responded with a question. "How much do you get paid to ask me these questions?" The sentry was puzzled by the response, but answered the rabbi's question. 2 drachmas a week. The rabbi said, "I'll pay you double if you stand outside my cottage every morning and ask me those 2 questions. Who are you, and what are you doing here?" What are you actually doing at your job? What are your efforts going towards? Are you getting a product to market? Are you curing cancer? Are you helping a small business succeed? Are you enriching people's lives by the code you're working on? Is this something that you believe in? Is the job you're doing something you believe in? So I say this because sometimes we get so deep in the code that we forget what our coding is going towards. And is this something that we really truly believe in? Because if it's not something we believe in, and it's just for a paycheck, you may not be getting as much contentment or as much gratification out of the work you're doing. But at the same time, if you're struggling with a project, you're struggling with code, and you pull yourself out and you realize, I still am invested in the mission of what I'm doing. then that can oftentimes pull you out of feeling bad about what you're working on and realize what it is, what it's going towards. So I challenge you to ask yourself these questions. Melanie Haas, some of you may know, she's a local here. If you want to stay, but something is wrong, you should talk to your boss or HR or whomever can help. But leaving a good job because of that bad person or situation does not solve the problem. If you don't tell them there's a genuine problem and they can't fix it. As challenging as this is to go to someone else and express your frustration, if you don't do it, the company has never had a chance to try and fix it. That problem will still be there when you leave and will be affecting someone else. So it's important for you to at least do your part and to inform management, because it's quite possible that they can do something about it and they can fix it, and then you can be happy there. So don't assume that what's going on in the company is unchangeable. Now granted, you may not get the answer you want and they may not help you. And that's definitely a sign that it's time to leave. But you won't know that unless you try. So keep that in mind. Before you start looking, tell your company how you feel without threatening to leave. Just tell them your concerns, at least give them a chance to make things right. Let them know that some things are making you unhappy, and make sure that you have some ideas for solutions. This is one of my, currently I'm a manager, and one of the hardest things to deal with is someone who lets me know that they have concerns and that they have complaints about something, but they come to me without solutions, without possible ways of trying to fix that. And they basically say, deal with it, and that's fine, I'm happy to do that, but if I get someone who comes to me and say, I have a couple ideas about how we could fix this, that's just world-changing for me, because I know that they really are invested and they're not just griping. They really do have an interest in making things right. So make sure that you bring solutions with you. So, are the reasons that you want to leave fixable? Do you have some solutions in mind? Have you talked with anyone who can make the change? And are you the one who needs to change? Just keep that in mind, that if we can do some introspection into how we are and how we might be contributing to the problem, if we don't do that and we are the problem, if I am the problem, no matter where I go, that problem's going to come with me, right? So it's really important that we introspect and we understand, what am I contributing to this, if I am at all. Do not threaten to leave. Do not say, well, fix this, or I'm just going to go off and go to XYZ Incorporated because I can get a job there easy. If you do that, you're painting a target on your back. So do not threaten to leave unless you have a job on you have a job in hand, offer in hand. Don't knee-jerk. Aaron Wolfson says, have another line to grab before letting go of this one. Corey House says, get a new job first. Okay? It's really important to know what you have before it's gone. It may be that you have much more than you thought, but this can help inform your decisions about future jobs as well. So one thing that we should all be doing on a regular basis is looking at our compensation. When I say compensation, I'm not talking about your gross salary. That is honestly not the important number you should be looking at. It's part of it, but it's not the important number you should be looking at. You should be looking at your gross salary, but you should also be looking at how much time off do you have, what your insurance premiums are, what disability insurance you have, life insurance you have. This is all through your company. If you have an EAP program, if you have a wellness program or a gym in-house, if you have food subsidies like a cafeteria, if there's retirement matching, that's a really big one because that can affect a lot. And any other kinds of matching. It could be HSA, flexible spending. All of those things need to factor into to what your compensation is. And I've been at a company where cell phone and internet stipend has been involved. So that's something too to consider. So all of these things, and plus some other things that I'm sure you could find, will actually go into your total compensation. This is a rough chart that I use to basically fill out, to figure out what my total compensation is. I use this for my current position, so that if I am looking at another position, I can fill this in for that position and actually do an apples-to-apples comparison. There are two columns on here. There's the column for what my employer pays, and there's a column for what I pay. What I need to look at is the total compensation, not just what my employer pays, but what my employer pays minus what I pay, because it's still coming out of my paycheck, right? As far as health insurance premiums are concerned, okay, or additional life insurance, or my retirement. If you have a certain percentage of retirement you're trying to put away, how much of that is your employer matching and putting away for you, and how much of that do you need to cover to make up that other percentage? So those things matter when you're comparing companies. We're going to come back to that chart in just a second when we're looking at a job offer. So, changing ladders. If you're thinking about moving to another stack, if you're thinking about changing languages, then you need to keep in mind that you will probably be brought down in your salary because you're no longer at the level where you are currently in your current, let's say PHP or JavaScript or CSS. And if you're moving to something else, you may not be at that same level, and you might have to get yourself ramped up more. Changing frameworks is not as big of a deal, but there was one time where I was going to move from PHP to Python, and that was a big deal. That was something where I was thinking Python is really what I want to do, and so I decided to start looking at that and realized that that's going to put me down at more of an entry-level position than I currently was. So, changing careers, and I say careers meaning languages, you'll probably be taking a pay cut, but you can do some things. You can get competent on your own to minimize the pay cut, and you can go to user groups and start hanging out with the developers who are where you want to be. So there was the time that I was thinking about switching to Python, I found a company that I thought was very interesting, and they were doing Python work. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go apply there so that I can do Python. So I went, I interviewed, they gave me a job, they gave me an offer, but the salary was considerably less than what I was making currently. And that was just because they didn't have the experience in Python. So I said, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to learn Python, I'm going to see what I can do. Sorry, I didn't get the job offer. Back up. I didn't get the job offer because I didn't have the experience. I went out and I found some information on Python, started learning that, and then thought maybe I could present at the Python user group, and because I knew some of the people who I was interviewing with were at that, and I could just say, here's how I learned how to do basic Python. So I did a presentation, and even before I did that presentation, once I said that I'd like to present on this, they gave me the job offer. It was less. I didn't take it, but them seeing the initiative of me wanting to learn it was enough for them. So keep in mind that you can get yourself out of barriers by doing a lot of self-learning on your own. Okay, so one of the hardest things in the process is actually finding a good job and knowing how to evaluate them. So the first thing we need to do is get our list of priorities up, lined up. This is an anonymous survey respondent. List your top 5 priorities of what you care about. Is it leadership, tech stack, work time, for open source projects? Look at what your current employer does poorly in regards to those, and use that as criteria to start your job search. It's really important that before we start looking, we know what we want. Because otherwise we have no way of evaluating that position against our own. So we need to get our priorities straight. What are our non-negotiables? These are the things that this job must have. What are our nice-to-haves, and what must that job not have? Maybe it's travel. Maybe you do want it. Maybe that's a non-negotiable. You want to be traveling, and maybe it's not. Maybe it can have no travel at all. So identifying these lists will help you then evaluate what the job is. So that you're not just doing it from an emotional standpoint, and emotions are part of it, and they can be a good thing. But if we don't have anything to compare them to as far as a quantitative set of metrics, then that's not going to be helpful for us. We're going to end up getting ourselves in a spot where we don't want to be. And revisit this list every once in a while, because you're going to change, things are going to change, your interests are going to change, your needs are going to change. So keep this list going over time. So let's say that we are at a point where we are ready to start looking. So we need to find the openings. We need to find the jobs. And that can be a needle in a haystack situation, especially if we have some pretty high standards. But there are better ways than just going to Monster or Indeed or whatever job site to find them. Quick show of hands, how many people here knew someone at the job that you're currently in before you got hired? Okay, so that's about half, maybe more. So that can be a really big factor for you, number one, getting the job, and for you knowing what you're getting into. If you know someone there, then you can ask them questions and say, okay, what's it like to work there? Are you happy there? And at the same time, they can go to bat for you, potentially, and say, I've worked with Andy before. Andy's really good at this. So I think we definitely need to at least bring him in for an interview. So that can be getting your foot in the door. So what are some ways that we can try and find what jobs are open? All natural, free-range, non-GMO networking. And what that means is meetups, hackathons, keeping up contacts from your previous jobs, going up to lunch occasionally with them, community groups like Coder Dojo, Code for America, Casey Witt, maybe working on open source projects. You're going to make contacts via that. And also make sure that you're a regular at these events and not a flake. Seeing that you're there consistently is going to show, for like example, user groups, is going to show people that you actually are committed to it. That can mean a lot. LinkedIn is LinkedIn, but LinkedIn has some pros. I'm not a huge fan of it, but the one thing that I am a huge fan of is being able to say, okay, I see that there's a recruiter hitting me up for a job at a certain company. I'm going to go to LinkedIn and see if there's anybody there right now. And also, I'm going to go and just at least check and see where people are now. I check in occasionally to see if people have changed jobs and where they are. Knowing that will help me then if I do get a recruiter hitting me up for something. I'll know, oh wait, I know somebody who's there. I'm going to go check with them and see how they feel about things there. So LinkedIn does have its pros, though they may be few. What was that?
I got a message from a recruiter that was a message to me about somebody else's resume. And then I messaged immediately right after, please disregard that message that I sent you. I had too many windows open.
Jeez.
Like, well, we're gonna popular over there.
We're gonna talk about recruiters in just a second. This is another anonymous quote. Read between the lines. And this is something similar to what Jennifer said. Jennifer said today. Words like superstar and ninja just mean expectations are unrealistic. Look for places that seem transparent and post realistic requirements. Superstar and ninja, rockstar. Again, that's exactly what Jennifer said today. It's 22 hours, and it's just coding all the time, and may not fit your lifestyle, or at least may not be sustainable for your lifestyle. So definitely read between the lines. Look for transparency. Look for realistic job postings. Now we're going to talk about recruiters. I think I have met some very, very good recruiters, and there are some that I actually keep in contact with. And if they send me a job opening, and it's coming from a certain recruiter, I will look at it because I know that they get it. But a lot of recruiters don't get it. I get stuff for like I don't know, like SQL integration, specialist. I'm like, that is nowhere near what I do, nor am I interested in it. So, so there's pluses and minuses, and of course, we are being sponsored by some good recruiting companies here. So, just kind of put that on the record. There are good used car dealers. There are bad used car dealers. Many recruiters will use a shotgun approach and just say, I've got this position, and I'm just going to throw it out to all the LinkedIn people that I can find, and they may not match. But you can have a good relationship with a recruiter who can get to know you, and then when the position does come up that does fit you, they'll be able to get that to you. So this is some personal policies that I use whenever a recruiter contacts me about a position. Before I ever decide to talk with them on the phone or meet with them in person, I ask for these things. I say, I need to know what the company is. I need to know what their salary range is. I need the employment status. Is this contract or is this direct hire? I need to get the location. And I need to know, one thing I've got that in here because it's important to me right now, is how much travel there is involved. Because these are the important things to me, and yours may be different. But I would say that knowing what the company is and knowing the salary range, if they're willing to disclose that, could easily be a deal killer. Because it may be a company that you just do not agree with what they do. So I always ask for that. Now, there have been times where they said, sorry, I'm not able to discuss this until we've talked on the phone or whatever, and I'm okay saying no. There have been times where I said no, and they said, well, okay, here's the company. So they may just be feeding you a line that they're not allowed to disclose. So anyway, so those are some things that I always ask any recruiter who contacts me. Because honestly, you don't want to waste anyone's time. You don't want to waste their time as they're looking for people, and you don't want to waste your own time. So there is a mutual reason to ask these questions. So what I've often heard is, okay, what's your current salary range? What do you currently make? I hate that. What do you currently make one? I really hate it.
Tell them more.
Yeah, well. So you have two options here. You can be honest and forthcoming, or you can say that the salary is negotiable and just stick to your guns. Sean Larkin has some really good answers to this as well. Some of these may venture into a gray area, so you use your own judgment for these. It would be really unfair for me to give a number because I haven't researched the fair market value of this position in this city. I'm looking for fair market value for the position in the city. I'm not at liberty to disclose my salary. Sorry, but I can't discuss my previous salaries as I have signed a non-disclosure agreement. So, you can choose from any one of these, or you can do whatever you need to. But of course, saying what your current salary is can certainly pigeonhole you. So you just need to be aware of that. Okay, so let's talk about interviewing and offers. We're not going to talk about the secrets to good interviewing, but we will talk about the things you need to watch out for and what questions you should be asking. Melanie says, it's important to remember that even though you feel like the interviewer is in the driver's seat, you have a lot of power. The demand for talent is high. If they aren't working to impress you and show you how awesome they are, be very skeptical. Interviews are two-way streets. This is not them figuring out if you're a good fit for the position. This is that and you figuring out this is a good company for you. So you need to be coming in with questions for them. Otherwise, you may not know what you're walking into. They may be giving you just the information that's enough to entice you. But there are questions that you can ask to really get an idea of what's going on there. So here's some red flags to watch out for. Vague job descriptions. We've kind of talked about that already with the superstar and all that stuff. But if the job description does not list good hard requirements, then that's something to watch out for. Too much HR involvement during the interview process. And that kind of also goes with the fourth one down there. Upper management is present at all times. So if HR is involved a lot and you're not ever dealing with the people you're going to work with, that's a big red flag. If there's upper management in every single part of your interview, that's also a big red flag because it's probably a micromanaging type environment. Needlessly complicated interview process. If they're just having you jump through hoops, then that's probably going to relate to how the job's going to go. You should keep an emotional eye out for the attitudes of the people interviewing you. What is their demeanor like? How are they coming into the room? Do they look completely exhausted? Do they look like they're unhappy? Do they look like they're happy? They're excited? That can certainly tell you a lot. Promises, promises, promises. If they are saying, you know what, we'll work that out. We'll figure that out. You know, we'll play it by ear as far as how we handle what this position does. That's a big red flag because you really don't have any idea of what they're going to be required of you. If there's no onboarding or training plans, and this is one quote or a story that I heard. If there are inspirational sayings on the wall, there was a CEO who loved having inspirational sayings on the walls of the all over the company, on the walls, the pillars, etc. Big bold letters, stuff like "We're different" and "We are a balanced people." A company that has to say that on the walls is not a company that actually is. So that's definitely a red flag. What I want to give you now are some less common questions that interviewees, let's say we are the interviewer being interviewed. These are some questions that we can ask that can give us some real insight into what's going on in the company. What is the leadership structure like? Who will be my supervisor? What is the turnover rate like? What's the average tenure for these types of positions? This is a huge one. Hopefully they're able to, they will tell you this, but if the turnover rate is, we're losing 2 developers, or we're having to fill 2 developer positions every 6 months, that's a problem. Depending on the developer size, the development team size, but, and our tenure rate is 2 years, and the company is, 15 years old, 10 years old at least, then there's a problem. Tell me about the last 3 developers you had to let go. Okay, maybe not 3, maybe it's past 2, whatever. But if they can tell you, here's why we let people go, maybe not specifics, but that can certainly help you understand what the expectation is for these developers in this position. How does the annual review process work? Well, we don't really have an annual review process. We just kind of, say good job, you're doing fine. If there's no real way to measure how you're doing there, then that's a problem. Is there a budget and timeline and time available for R&D? That might be important to you. Are the developers dedicated or shared across teams? If they're shared across teams, you're going to be spread around and be bounced around all over the place. And how often are developers working after hours? Depending on your lifestyle. That could be a really important question. So I think these are some things that that people may not ask. I've done a ton of interviews, and there have been so many times where the person had no questions to ask. And from a management side, that's a big red flag. So having questions is definitely beneficial on both sides. Meet the team. If the development team that you'd be working on or working with is not in the interview process, you really should ask to try and meet them. So try to meet. You could meet outside of the interview with some team members, especially if you know them already, or you can ask to work with them for a day. This is something that a friend of mine did. They were interviewing at places. They got 2 job offers, and they decided, well, I'm kind of torn between these, and they said, you know what, I want to work with your developers for a day. And, 3 offers. 2 of the companies said, okay, that's fine, which blew my mind. I figured none of them would do that. But 2 of the companies said, sure, yeah, come on over and you can work with the developers. And that person was able to then really easily decide which company was the right fit. We've actually made that part of our interview process at Stowers. We give time for the interviewee to work with 2 different people as they're doing regular work. And there's a reason we do that. One, for them to see what it's like, what the code looks like, and how we do stuff. But also for the developer to see what kind of questions they ask. Is this something where they're interested? Like, oh, well, why'd you do it this way instead of this way? Or tell me what this means. I don't understand this part. If we're getting those questions, that is a really big plus, because it shows that they're actually interested and that they're kind of getting what's going on. So I would say if there's any way that you can work with the team beforehand, then you should do that. And I don't think it really hurts to ask. Startup concerns. So I've gone through some interview processes. I actually with a startup a long time ago, and I kind of got an idea of how the startup worked. I was really the only developer on it at the time, but I was close enough with the founder to know what things to look out for as far as how much runway is available. That meaning, how much do you have in the bank right now that, if your clients stopped, how long could you keep the company going? How many clients do you have? How many of those clients are actually paying clients? Because there are a lot of times that startups will just give stuff away for free for a while, just to try and drum up interest. So you can't just say how many clients do you have, but how many paying clients do you have? And then also, how many investors do you have? How successful was the last round of funding? Because if they only have one investor, that can be really risky. And if it's just my mother-in-law is the investor, that's very risky. So keep in mind that what the type of investors they have, the quality of investor they have, could definitely indicate how stable that startup is. Let's talk about evaluating job offers. So let's say the interview went well, and they've given you a job offer. You need to get all of the numbers at this point, if you haven't already gotten them. And when I say all the numbers, I mean the salary and get the benefits. There have been times where I've asked for the benefits and they gave me like 2-year-old like a benefits PDF of what what they handed out to their employees. Like, I was like, no, give me like December's benefit numbers, and so they had to go and find that. But it's really important for you to understand how much the premium is, because I've been at a place where the benefits were zero for me, and I've been at a place where the benefits were $600 a month for me, and I'm sure that it could be even more than that. So $600 a month versus zero, that's going to change your net take home drastically, no matter what the gross number is that they give you. What's the retirement matching like? All those things are very important to get, so that you can compare, again, the total compensation, that chart we looked at before, with what they're offering you. And make sure that those who depend on you, family, most likely, have buy-in, and at least have had a chance to talk to you about the position before you accept it. And then also, sometimes it's important to find out what the pay period timing is. Is it every 2 weeks? Is it every month? Is it twice a month? That can sometimes change how you budget at home. So let's do a comparison. Let's say that this is your current job. These numbers, don't worry if they're realistic or not. These are just numbers, okay? So let's say your employer is paying $50,565 from all this stuff here, and you're paying your insurance premiums, which is $3,600, and that's, again, don't worry about how realistic these numbers are. So if we look at what we're being offered, look at the gross salary. Previously, gross salary was $40,000. This offer is for $50,000. That's really good. But if you look at this, insurance premiums went up. Retirement matching is no longer there, so you're having to foot that bill if you want to keep your retirement the way it was going, right? So all of a sudden, you're now paying $8,250 when previously you were only paying $3,600, right? To keep up the same level of compensation. So suddenly we're at 44, like around 45,000, where previously we were at almost 47,000. So that gross salary is not your indication, okay? All of these things matter, and maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but all of these things matter, and it's really important to get these hard numbers before you decide to take a job. Remember, vacation time is negotiable. That's something that you can ask for. Know your worth and don't get undervalued, and be okay walking away if things don't match your priority list. If we have a priority list and we don't stick to it and we compromise on it, it's not worth having a priority list. Okay? Leaving on good terms. It's really important to leave on good terms with your current employer. If you want them to say, "You're welcome back anytime." Okay? I've left companies where they say, "Whenever you want to come back, you can come back." Okay? So you never know if things are going to happen, and you do need to come back. Does anyone know this show?
Psych.
Yeah, it's Psych. So you don't want to go out like Gus is doing here. As much fun as that would be, it looks way fun to do. But you don't want to leave on bad terms. You don't want to leave a sour taste in your current employer's mouth when you leave, because you never know if the people who you're currently working with end up going to a company that you want to go to, and then they say, "Oh man, you should have seen how they left that company. They just totally lit it on fire," and you've just burned your opportunity at that company you really wanted to work with. Okay, so keep that in mind. Got several answers here. Don't burn any bridges. Don't burn bridges. Don't burn bridges. Don't be a dick. Don't burn bridges. Make sure you don't burn bridges on the way out. Yeah, that was really kind of cool to see all these people say, "Be careful." Okay, so we're not going to burn bridges. Let's talk about the counteroffer. This can happen. I don't know how frequently it happens, but I know that it can happen. If you say, when you do finally approach them and you say, "Okay, I've shared my concerns, and we've, doesn't seem like we're going to be able to work through these concerns, or we can't resolve the concerns. I have a job offer now, so I'm going to, so that's where I am." So there are obviously two different camps on this debate about whether you should take a counteroffer or not. Let's say the counteroffer is enticing enough. If you take the counteroffer, you might be seen as someone who's not a long-term employee, because they might just jump at the next opportunity to leave with a better offer. And therefore, you may not get invested in. But if you really want to stay, and the only thing making you leave is compensation, then you should consider. But make sure that it's understood that you intend to be around for a long time. Okay? There are people who say never take a counteroffer, no matter what, because of the appearance of you taking that may end up tainting, be tainted in the company. I'm going to leave that up to you to decide. Just know that there's pros and cons to those. So let's say you do leave. How do you leave? How can you leave well? And some of these are kind of, just maybe a little bit technical, but mind payroll's timing. Try and line up your departure with payroll ending their pay period. That can really help them. But give plenty of notice. 2 weeks is the standard, but it's possible that if you're working on a pretty major project, that you might need a little bit more time. I have worked at a company where people have offered 2 weeks, but they've just said you're free to go now. We won't talk about the details of that, but that's happened too. But at least you've given plenty of notice. If you do have the opportunity, do a good job of training the next person who's going to take over for you. Show your appreciation. Go to those people who've made a difference in your career at that company, and make sure that they know that you really appreciate them. Do a happy hour. You know, on your last day. That can always leave a really positive feeling in everyone's mind when you leave. Make sure you keep in touch with your former coworkers, and then make sure you thank those people at the highest level that you have contact with. That you thank them for the opportunity to work with them. All of these things can lead to a "you're welcome back anytime" response. Okay. All right. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. So thank you guys for listening, and I'm happy to talk about any questions or anything I've talked about here. How much of this stuff was just like, well, duh? Most of it?
I thought
Good stuff.
I liked the questions that you would ask at an interview.
Yeah.
That some of those I wouldn't have thought to ask that. Like it may have been asking. Like I feel like I may have been intruding on their information on what they know.
Yeah, and I mean, but
what they're willing to share. You know.
Yeah. Keep in mind though that they have every option to say we can't really disclose that, but at the same time they could say that and realize, well, they really are interested about how stable this company is.
Yeah, I guess the one that stood out to me was why have your previous developers left, or where are they now, or something like that. Yeah. Again, that could be something that they will disclose or they won't. But again, just asking the question can actually be a way for them to go, okay, well they really are taking this seriously. No. I had a question about how you would compare benefits for paid time off, as in you get this much per paycheck, or we don't have a policy. We treat that as you will give us what you need off, and as long as you
that whole like
as long as you don't
unlimited unlimited time off. Yeah, that's a tricky one because sometimes they'll say unlimited time off, but then there's just an unspoken rule that if you took time off, then they're going to look negatively on that. The only way you can really answer that question is to talk to people who are there and say, or maybe you can ask, well, how much time do, if they do offer that, well, how much time do people normally take off? What's the average that people take off?
Yeah.
That could be useful information. But, it does help to know some people or to talk to some people at the lower level to say, how much time do you take off?
Yeah, it's just kind of weird. It leaves you in a weird sort of spot because when you have time off, it feels much more comfortable to be like, okay, I got this time off.
Right. It's a lot easier to point to that number, right? Mm-hmm.
So it feels more, legitimate.
It does. Absolutely it does. Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable when you have clear set boundaries that you're well within. Right. Yeah.
When you were doing your pricing graph, how did you land on a value for vacation?
So vacation, you can actually just take your hourly rate.
So if you do that though, and then you have your base pay and then your vacation, that becomes above what?
That's a very fair point. But also keep in mind that when you leave your company, they have to pay you the vacation time. So it doesn't necessarily factor in.
That's to a limit.
That's the trick. That's why they're popular.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
That's how they make money back. If you have unlimited time off, it means that
you won't get
Monday can use social pressure to make sure that you don't take it off.
Right.
It relieves management of all of the necessary burden in order to make sure you do take the time off. And if you leave, you don't get any of that.
That's a really good point. Thank you for saying that.
But also like, as long as you calculate it the same way, like you're just making sure you're comparing
apples to apples.
The end number doesn't.
I get it. So the end numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that can be looked at outside of the dollar amount. You can certainly look at that outside the dollar amount. Just use that as like a separate line item. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing. This is really great. In the things to do as you're leaving. One thing I try to do every time I've left a job.
This one here.
Write documentation. Especially if I give notice and I know that I'm transitioning out projects.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend that 2 weeks writing as many words as I can.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to the train the next in line, right? Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good use of time.
Yeah. The other question was just on recruiters. Do you think it's professional to have a relationship, and like how do you find a person that's not bad?
If so like really there are maybe like 2 or 3 that I've run into that I'm like, okay, this is actually a really good fit for, like, they definitely understand where I am and they understand what position probably would be a good fit. There have been a couple of recruiters, and it's been more recently, that I said, okay, well, if you find more like this, I would like to hear about that, you know, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out. So it's just a matter of like being willing to just at least start a LinkedIn thread or an email thread, you know, and ask them. And a lot of times they'll come back and say, okay, well, show me why this doesn't work for you, or tell me what you do need as far as, and then you can tell it. And if they ever come back to you with something that matches that, you found a good relationship because they're listening to you, right? But I think usually you can use a fairly good gut instinct. If a recruiter comes to you with actually like a viable position, then I think that's a good place to start. And then, like, 'cause there's definitely one particular recruiter where we had a conversation, and she asked all the right questions, and I was able to, you know, relay to her what I'm looking for. She had a position. She's like, well, what do you think about? She's like, well, the position I have for you in mind is not the right one, but I do have this other one that I think is going to match you better. And I was like, well, okay, that's fine. You can send it my way. I looked at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that does fit me better. So it's just a matter of, you know, at least giving them a chance, right? Like just shutting the recruiter down is, you know, you won't ever give them a chance. And as tough as that is, and as maybe it's not going to be super fruitful, but when you do bear fruit from it, it could be really good fruit. Could be the lead to your next job. And there's definitely been like one of the positions that that recruiter gave me happened to be a place where I knew somebody. So that was, you know, I was able to follow up and check on that and realize, yeah, this could be a good place. So, you know, it's still good to listen to them on the position because you may be able to hit up one of your contacts. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Hope you guys had a good first day.